Garrick Alford, of course, is number 9 on our leaderboard. They're on our right, playing Azorius Control, starting off there with what looks to be Restless Anchorage. And then on our left is Bob Culp playing Izzet Phoenix. So we mentioned this format very much about vampires and Phoenix. Now, traditionally, I've heard Control has a good Phoenix matchup. You agree, Devin?
I don't know. I've like I said, I've been playing Phoenix for probably about 2 months now. Maybe not as long as some of the other Phoenix grinders have been. I have noticed that I think I've been winning more than I've been losing against Blue White, and it's possible maybe their sideboard plan isn't quite as good, and maybe they're not as experienced in the matchup. But I think what's interesting is I think game one is a spot where the blue-white control deck doesn't have a ton of graveyard hate, like doesn't have any of the rest in pieces or Cutsil's flankers. And then once you get to the post-board games, you can really kind of transform and sculpt your deck around their sideboard cards. Like you can board in additional threats like Crackling Drake and Brazen Borrower and sort of sidestep their heavy graveyard plan. Now, the one difference here is if Garrick has one of the 3 copies of Narset, that is a card that is really hard to beat in game one.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, as you can see right now, is Bob Culp moving through their deck with all of these cantrips. Consider Sleight of Hand, of course, does get around Narset, but the Considers, Ops, all the things of that nature are drawing cards and doing so generally in the same turn. Treasure Cruise, of course, among your more powerful cards in the fair matchups as well. And all those shut down by Narset, Parter of Veils, as we are just playing lands and passing, posturing that I quite like from the Phoenix deck. I like just kind of cantripping, really making sure that you hit your land drops in this kind of a matchup. And both players doing a very good job of that. No spells yet cast by Garrick Alford. And you mentioned, well, here's number 1. And that one's going to be No More Lies on the front half of Picklock Prankster, also known as Free the Fae.
Yeah, that one's pretty important because if you let the Picklock Prankster resolve and Bob does find a cruise, there's enough cards in the graveyard to say play land 4, cruise with 3 mana open, and that would be enough to pay for the No More Lies. One other interesting thing about Bob's hand and kind of the issue with this matchup is you'll notice that I believe Bob had a Phoenix and a Lightning Axe in hand, but because Garrick is playing the deck he's playing, you're not really ever going to find targets for that axe. So in a creature matchup, you say axe, discard the Phoenix, kill one of your creatures, and kind of get that into the graveyard to get going. It's going to be a lot harder for Bob to remove the Phoenixes from his hand unless he can find something like a Ledger Shredder plus a cantrip to be able to discard that. So we might even just see hardcast mode, and that's exactly what we see, Drake.
Oh yeah, give me a Snare Thopter. There's that bread and butter. The Phoenix deck is, actually Snare Thopter's not that bad of a card. 4 mana, 3/2 haste, getting into the red zone. Now, part of the problem here is, of course, the various exile effects that are present in the Azorius Control deck, and that's part of why I think there's this perception of the Azorius Control having a pretty good matchup. Is a lot of the way you get card advantage as the Izzet Phoenix deck is by recurring these Phoenixes as they are killed, because of course they have quite a bit of pressure as a 3-power flyer. If you exile those, you don't have access to that same card advantage. You're not bringing all these birds back and dealing tons of damage and all of the things that come with the Izzet Phoenix deck as it has existed since its printing. And Wandering Emperor is among the mix for that. There's instant speed ones as well, March of Otherworldly Light and things of that nature. Now, no play main phase from Garrick. Interested to see if we're just going to have any fights on end step or anything of that nature. Maybe try to set up some planeswalkers. I think the board state that Garrick generally wants to build to is having uncontested planeswalkers, which is difficult to do against Phoenix because of the haste.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a spot where Bob now has established the threat. There's not really a lot of resistance here from Garrick. And I think Bob had something like, Ledger Shredder plus maybe a cantrip. And he's like, you know what? I mean, I'm just going to attack you with this 3/2 and make you answer. I don't really need to do anything else until the 3/2 gets answered. So a little bit of patience here from Bob. And, I believe maybe holding up a Picklock Prankster as well, as we see Field of Ruin take care of the Hall of the Storm Giants. That's another, it feels like this matchup, there's a lot of layers where you have layer 1, early game, where maybe you go like Shredder, cantrip, discard Phoenix, layer 2, which is hardcast Snare Thopters, and then layer 3, which is, I get to 7 mana to activate Hall of the Storm Giants. So there's a lot of like different places in this matchup where you can kind of pick and choose your fights, and looks like Bob is just saying, I'm just gonna hold it, not gonna cast the Ledger Shredder, not gonna play into Verdict, and does resolve that Picklock. And we see another new card here, one that we kind of haven't talked about, Drake, this Prof's Eidetic Memory. This is a card from Murders of Karloff Manor that Phoenix players have been adapting, and I gotta say, I am a very, very big fan.
Aren't you a big fan of that card? I was about to say, yeah. I think you're pretty in on this one.
Oh yeah. No, I
No,
love this
yeah, get a
card.
look
Yeah,
at that.
especially
Okay.
once you get to a spot where you just go cast it, treasure cruise. Now, obviously, you can't hit it off Picklock Prankster, kind
Right,
of
you
a
can't hit it off the
downside,
Free
but
the Fae, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, but we did hit Temporal Trespass, I think. So, whatever. We have another copy. There's two in the main deck here for Bob Culp. And again, this is a new innovation that I was not even aware of, playing two copies of that in the Phoenix deck now, the Prof's Idalectic Memory. Idalectic? I hope I'm saying that right. As
Nobody
we go
does.
back. So, we saw Garrick actually pause there. We saw Dovin's Veto, No More Lies among the counter spells in Garrick's hand. Chose to play neither. Did choose to counter the first Picklock Prankster on Free the Fae. Rather, and choosing not to on the second one, instead reaching for, it looks like Iganjo is going to take down
Yep.
the
Yep.
Phoenix. So this is not the way you really want to do it, because that does put it in the graveyard, which makes it, liable to be brought back by simply just casting 3 spells. So maybe getting a little nervous with his life total is Garrick, as here comes Treasure Cruise. Have to exile 7. Bob Culp taking a look now.
Yep, and like you said, there's a Dovin's Veto and the Dovin's Veto and Normalize. So Garrick had the choice to Normalize the Picklock Prankster when Bob had 3 mana available, but really wanted to not get punished by Cruz. Patience from Garrick definitely paying off here. And now Bob doesn't have enough cards in the graveyard to cast that Temporal Trespass that he picked up off of the Picklock Prankster. Could just maybe deploy the Prankster. And we're going to go for a Shredder here. Ooh, okay,
And
Shredder
notably,
and
Shredder
Picklock.
is second spell, so the Picklock's not going to trigger. That's third spell, because we
Yep.
did lead on Treasure Cruise. So no triggers quite yet. 2 creatures in play. So I guess if we are looking for a target for any of our Wraths, could be a potentially good one. But it's Narset
Ooh.
cards you called out being very problematic. Shields are down for Bob, and this one's going to go minusing right away. Top 4. Show me a non-creature, non-land card.
Well, here's the thing, though. Narset, very, very good on an empty board, but Bob already has 2 power in play. As you see, Garrick finds another Narset, so maybe he doesn't even care if the first one dies now. But maybe Bob could just say, okay, I'm going to cast a couple of cantrips. I know I'm not going to get the extra cards, but just to get that Phoenix back to clear the Narset. Also, could potentially set up a Trespass, right? There's 4 cards in the graveyard, 5 mana. Maybe you have something like a Picklock Prankster that can turbocharge the Trespass. And it looks like Bob also picked up a copy of Arclight Phoenix, so that might even be able to just clean the answer to the Narset too.
Yeah, Arclight Phoenix in hand, 1 in yard, multiple ways. And this is part of the problem with Planeswalkers in this matchup. They are typically how the control deck looks to snowball its advantage, but hard to get through. As No More Lies going to exile the Phoenix from hand. That's a good interaction point, I'd say, for Garrick, but there is still power in play. And just a second spell means that Narset's dead. Here comes an attack. That one's going to happen. No second spell for Bob. Does have a land. I believe only a few cards left in hand. Lightning Axe, Temporal Trespass among the next. As we go back to Garrick, who gets to untap with an Narset.
Yeah, and that's as we see a Supreme Verdict here cast going to clear up the creatures. That was a spot where Bob really did not want to play a second spell because the Ledger Shredder is not a May ability. So Ledger Shredder is going to force you to quote unquote draw a card, which you can't do, but then you still have to discard to the Connive. So that's definitely a spot where Bob did not want to trigger that Shredder. And yeah, Bob's hand's not looking really great. I think it might just be 2 lands, an axe, and a Trespass. So not really a lot to work with here, especially in the face of that Narset.
Yeah, this is a tough spot. I know I've played quite a bit of the matchup from the Phoenix side in the past, and the Lightning Axes in game 1 actually most of the time get used on your own creatures, specifically Phoenixes, to protect them from things like March and Wandering Emperor, things the like. That way you can bring them back later. It doesn't feel good, but you just need your Phoenixes to survive. And in a spot like this, where you really need to start putting some pressure on Garrick, that is part of the equation is here. I think we're activating a Castle Ardenvale and insta. Oh yeah, we're pointing. Let's see what this land is.
I think it's Castle.
Castle Ardenvale making a 1/1 human. All right, so not pretty, but I mean, it's a blocker on the ground if there is any kind of pressure that can come that way. Do have a hold of Storm Giants if we want to take that direction as well. And can start pressuring Bob's life total. I mean, it's slow, but control decks aren't known for winning quick. So this is a plan for Garrick that, of course, if Bob continues to brick off a little bit, that did not look like a good draw to me. Second Lightning Axe is not strong. Another land added to the mix. Here comes another 1/1 human on step.
Drake, what's interesting about this is Garrick is actually giving targets for Bob's dead removal spells. So Bob might actually be in a position now where you can go like removal spell, third removal spell, kill 3 tokens, get back Phoenix, try to pressure the Narset. Now, I mean, maybe that's not even good because Garrick has 2 copies of Restless Anchorage that can just jump in front of the Phoenix to keep that Narset in play. But I mean, it is something for Bob in this game where, it looks like all of Bob's cards are dead. It's a light at the end of the tunnel, I guess.
Yeah, I drew a copy of Fiery Impulse as well, and that's another creature removal spell that you can find a target, but it's not. I mean, it's not the way you want to do it. Now you could
Right.
do something like set up all of that and actually start to fuel your graveyard for the trespass too. So we really could start to cast another impulse drawing. Jeez, these draw steps have been brutal
All these red
for
cards.
Bob Gulp here.
I think it's
Yeah,
going to
the
be
red
time
cards
this
been
turn,
good.
though.
Yeah, it looks like we're getting something started. Here comes Impulse. Here comes second Impulse. Pick off another token, and then we can axe the. Oh, sorry. It's a third
Three
Impulse.
impulses.
Take care of
See,
all the
Garrick's
tokens.
like,
That's
yeah.
going to bring the Phoenix back.
And like you mentioned,
Oh,
now
boy.
we have enough cards in graveyard for that trespass. Now, I don't remember if Garrick still had a counterspell left over. I think there might be a Dovin's Veto. I can't quite get a good glimpse of it, though. But if there's no counterspell, you say maybe attack the Narset. Yeah, I guess this is the issue, though, because Garrick's just going to try to trade for the Anchorage. You would assume. It looks like
I mean,
that
he doesn't
is
even
the
necessarily have
case.
to. Like the Narset, I mean, he has another one in hand. He wouldn't mind
Yeah.
deploying for the most part. And I mean, the Anchorage is also kind of low value, but it's a land. And having, keeping up with Bob Culp on mana is something to think about. As we see, yeah, Garrick's kind of really putting some thought into this. It's not as trivial of a decision as it might look. Putting the bird back in the graveyard doesn't feel great, even though he did just do a lot of work to put it into play. If we can start to get a cantrip chain going, that could feel not very good. Also, as you mentioned, gives another target for the creature removal spells, which Bob is clearly flooded on.
Yeah, I think Garrick is maybe thinking about blocking to prevent a cruise this turn, but with the Dovin's Veto in hand, you know that Bob can't fight over the cruise this turn, even if the Narset does die. And with that backup Narset, as you mentioned, you want to just kind of get full value out of the second one. So Garrick's going to attack in here with the token, and we'll see. We would imagine that the second Narset gets deployed here because that can stop top deck cruises and things of that nature. But we'll see what Garrick decides to do.
Yeah, obviously it's also very good if we can deploy second Narset and find. Okay, well, never mind. We just have. I was
Ooh.
saying, if we're looking for marches or any exile effect for the Phoenix, that's a great way to do it. Well, if we just have Wandering Emperor already, I really like this sequencing and starting there. Getting the Phoenix off the board, really covering that. Get a look at the very powerful Mythic from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. This is a Planeswalker with Flash. That, of course, that third ability very strong against the Phoenix deck. Exile target tapped creature, you gain 2 life. And yeah, this is the play I make quite a bit. Kill my own creature, pitching another Lava Axe to put it just back in the graveyard. That way, not only do you stop the life gain, but you also get your bird back in the graveyard instead of in exile. Doesn't feel good. Sometimes has to happen. Garrick respects it enough. He looks like he's going to be reaching for the veto.
Yep, so we're going to fight over this. So that's going to be the second Phoenix exiled. And conveniently, Drake, Garrick has 3 mana left over, and there's the Narset. So now,
Treasure Cruise still covered. Yeah.
Yep. And I like this play from Garrick not minusing the Narset because he recognizes one of the ways that Bob gets out of this is top deck Phoenix and then attack the Narset for 3. But if you leave it on 5, even if Bob draws Phoenix, you go attack Narset for 3, then you can deal with the Narset at your leisure next, or deal with the Phoenix at your leisure next turn, and make sure to keep that Narset in play because at this stage of the game, realistically, the only way Bob gets out of this is resolve Cruise with a Narset not on the battlefield, and it doesn't look like we're anywhere close to that.
Yeah, I believe this trespass is using the explore mode of temporal trespass. Just
8 mana
casting
explore.
it while it works. Now it does exile itself, I
Yeah,
believe.
it
So we're gonna have to
does.
get that one in exile. Can't delve it out later to other things. Will come up potentially. Yeah, there's the land drop. But no cards in hand right now for Bob Culp. Just top decking. Treasure Cruise not even a good draw. Not a good spot for Bob to be in, as one card has to be very strong. If he's just passing with nothing, we are done here. And yeah, Bob sees the writing on the wall. This is the what we were building towards. The double Planeswalkers. Once you have those running Planeswalkers every single turn, that's when Azorius Control really starts to turn the corner over a deck like Phoenix. And, I hate to say, I don't want to just blame the draws. There was a lot of play to the early game. You mentioned the stages to that match, but there in that late game where Bob really needed to get a good draw or two, all fiery impulses off the top.
Impulse, just could not stop drawing the red cards. But maybe we'll see if we can take a look at the sideboards and see, like we mentioned, the sideboarded games are really where it gets interesting. So Bob, if you take a look here, Bob's got some disputes, 3 of them, a Beacon Bolt, a Negate, an Aether Gust, a Red Cap Melee, 2 Ashiok, 2 Crackling Drake, 2 Brazen Borrower, and 2 Young Pyromancer. So if you expect your opponent to have a lot of anti-graveyard stuff, Rest in Pieces, Cutsil's Flankers, all of this stuff, you can really kind of transform your deck and go more away from the Phoenix plane and go into sticky threats like Crackling Drake, Young Pyromancer, Brazen Borrower, along with the counter spells. So, I mean, Bob could board in upwards of 10 cards here. Wants to cut all those red cards. Likely, what I've been doing a lot is cutting the Trespass Galvanic stuff against Blue-White because you don't really need to time walk against them, and that makes room for all these threats and the counter spells.
Yeah, I agree with you. When I've played this matchup, I board similarly. I like bringing in all the threats, the Crackling Drakes, the Borrowers, the Young Pyromancers, cutting a bunch of the red cards, but also shaving on Delve spells as well. Usually it is the Trespass, but I actually a lot of times do keep the iteration. Whatever. Small stuff doesn't really matter here or there, but a lot more threats can come in over these creature removal spells. Maybe you can leave one or two, something like Beacon Bolt that definitely works if you're concerned about any kind of big creatures or anything like that coming out of the sideboard. For the most part, most of these red cards that are not specifically Arclight Phoenix need to get out of the deck, and that's going to be involve some heavy sideboarding from the Is It Phoenix side. And this is really where I think the matchup in game one doesn't feel very good. And this is kind of my opinion on the matchup, of course. But I think for Control, it's favored in game one for a lot of what you just saw. Once you are able to make these massive overhauls in games 2 and 3, I think the Phoenix deck gets a lot of points and maybe even starts to look a little bit favored in the matchup. So heavy changes here for Bob Culp. Let's take a quick look at Garrick Alford and see what he's working with. Phoenix, known quantity in the deck, potentially the best deck in the format, should have some options here. So let's take a look. We got 4 copies of Kutzel's Flanker, 3 copies of Mystical Dispute, 3 Regal Caracal, 2 Shark Typhoon, 1 Temporary Lockdown, and of course the companion Kahira, the Orphan Guard. So, from the control side, you mentioned some of the important cards being Rest in Pieces and Kutzel Flankers. No Rest in Peace, but 4 copies of Flankers. I think we're going to see those. Any other changes you're looking to make? Disputes? Anything of the like?
So this is kind of interesting. You almost seem like both players are kind of doing this transformational sideboard, and it's like, okay, so the Phoenix deck is sideboarding in such a way to sidestep the Graveyard Hate. The blue-white control deck can actually sidestep in such a way that just completely invalidates like the removal spells getting cut, right? There's 4 Flankers and 3 Regal Caracals. That's 7 creatures that really do impact the battlefield. And if you're the blue-white control side of things and you expect your opponent to cut all of those red cards, seems like a really good spot to board in those creatures.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a spot for you to, and even things like Shark Typhoon can kind of represent the same thing. Shark Typhoon is a 4/4, requires really only Lightning Axe gets it. You can't just play with a few of the impulses to be mana efficient or anything like that. Because obviously, as we saw, there is some utility of the creatures stopping the exile from happening. So it's not unreasonable to leave some number of the red cards in, like 1 or 2, just for that reason and to maybe get a creature out the way. But you have to have specifically Lightning Axe against something larger than 3 toughness. So making a 4/4 shark that blocks Phoenixes and doesn't get picked off by removal could be big as well. So you have a lot of creature options in game 2. And like I said, the Kutzel's Flankers, no Rest in Peace, really only relying on the Flankers as the Graveyard Hate means that you have creatures to try to race. And that can be a big deal as well for Garrick Alford. So a little bit of maybe some mind gaming that can happen here with the sideboarding. Players maybe not cutting all the removal spells. Players bringing all the creatures, maybe not. There's a very high likelihood there's going to be additional changes after game 2, assuming we get a game 3 and Bob Culp's able to steal one from Garrick Alford, who of course is number 9 on our leaderboard, 1-0 here on a great start. Needs to have a good weekend in order to punch his ticket, but doesn't need that good of a weekend. I think Tim Hatch, Harrison Canfer, they understand their positions here on the leaderboard, getting precarious as Bob Culp starts out. No turn 1 play that we see. Now, of course, typically in-step cantrip, pretty common. Garrick likely leading on a tap land.
Garrick's at 46 points. We get Joey at 52, Connor at 57, Harrison at 65. So there's kind of that big scrum, and all 4 of those players are here today. So hopefully we can get some more of them on camera. But as just kind of like the matchup, we talked about, there's a lot of like stages of the game in game 1 and all of this, like there's kind of this cat and mouse game of the sideboarding. And that's why I love this matchup so much, is that it feels like no 2 games are going to be the same as we see. Is that a
no second land from Bob? I believe so. Sunken Citadel into Hollowed Fountain. Garrick was on the draw. We cantripped, graveyarded what looked to be a treasure cruise. Drew, no land, and there's a Crackling Drake. That's no land either. I think we're going to discards.
Oh, no.
You can discard a Phoenix at least. There's something.
That is a card to discard. I don't think Bob did that on purpose. Didn't just say, okay, missed my land drop, go to discard. So it looked like what Bob kept was 1 land, Dispute, maybe 2, looks like 2 cantrips, and we did find the second land, so there you go. Trying to get a good look at Bob's hand. Looks like I see Dispute, Profs, 2 Pranksters, Crackling Drake, and a Cruise. So, I mean, the hand is pretty good. So I understand the keep from Bob, but especially with 2 cantrips.
Yeah, I mean, 2 cantrips makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've kept hands like that before. It is really, really unfortunate when they don't get there. But I mean, we did find a second land, and I would say on time enough that this game is just over. Now, I do think that Bob is behind, did not have as much time to develop things like Free the Fae as you're seeing here. And the hand for Garrick looks to be very strong. Lots of counter magic to work with, as here comes a Censor, which is going to look great against opponents missing land drops. Force Spike, notably pretty good in those kinds of situations. Yeah, that's in the graveyard. And plenty of, like, I see Dovin's Veto, Counter Magic to work with, Dispute
Well,
as well.
So this is pretty funny, Drake, because Garrett decided to go for the sensor on. Yeah, Derek decided to go for the sensor on the Picklock Prankster holding up the. Oh, he had normalized. I thought it was.
Oh, yes, he's
Dovin's Veto.
normalized
Never
too.
mind,
Come
okay.
on. Garrick's got it all covered. You were
I
worried.
thought it was
You were
Veto.
sweating.
I thought it was Veto,
I mean, I
and
think
Garrett
it's
was going to
Veto
get.
too.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I think he has like everything. He's all
that
Counter
would've-
Magic.
That would have been funny if you chose to use the sensor and then got punished by the 2-drop creature if you didn't have the normalize.
There's a main phase opt. I think once again looking to hit land drop number 3. See a host of spells in hand. Now we do know there is a dispute, so Bob actually can defend his spells at a very mana efficient rate, given the opportunity to do so. But missing land drop number 3 and a handful of Picklock Pranksters that I saw, that's a 2-mana spell. Not what you want to be looking at when you're stuck on 2 lands against a control deck full of censors and no more lies.
Yeah, now Garrick's getting to the point where we have 6 mana, so you could even say Narset pay for dispute, or 4-drop hold up another counter spells. We see a young Pyromancer off the top here for Bob. Really rough draw steps, and yeah, once you're in this position, you can't really afford to hold up mana. So Bob just going to jam the Pyromancer, and to his credit, Garrick, the last counter spell I believe is that Dovin's Veto, so not able to fight over the Pyromancer. We'll see if this Deluge can find an answer. Now, hypothetically,
great one to have here.
If the Deluge finds a bunch of counter spells and maybe Garrick doesn't have a direct answer to the Pyromancer, Bob untaps, finds a cantrip, does some stuff that way. Like there's a path to victory here for Bob, but it's gonna be a tough one.
Yeah, especially here comes March. That is a 3-mana March. That is kind of taxing on the mana, I'd say, as Garrick having no issues hitting land drops. Going to shock in a Hollowed Fountain. Represents lands number 4. Did tap Arden Veil, so we can't use Sunken Citadel or do any tricky stuff with that in order to try to start activating those lands like we saw in game 1. Sleight of Hand coming down. Now, if we can chain together 3 spells, there is a bird still in the yard, so that can really get something cooking too from the early discard to hand size. But so far, we've just been struggling so much to hit land drops. I believe didn't even find one there. Here's an opt.
And an opt. At what point does Garrick start countering these? I think he's thinking about it.
I think that one maybe was worth countering. If we find land and there's like a 3rd spell like Treasure Cruise, that's actually kind of problematic for you. I think I really would have put some thought into countering that opt.
Be topped, presumably.
Oh, a tap land, of course. All the Storm Giants, and here's a second memory deluge for Garrick, continuing to build up temporary lockdown and some lands among the mix. Not the best deluge, but honestly doesn't really have to be, as
That's
Bob has
tough.
really been struggling to get the mana started.
I wonder if you're in Bob's spot there, finding that 3rd. So you have the cruise in hand. Do you ever consider bottoming that haul there just to try and just high roll the untap land? Because maybe you're in a spot where you're so far behind that maybe you need to hit the untap land there. It's kind of close.
It is close. I mean, hitting lands, any kind of lands, like assuming there's an untap land on top, like if some stuff happens, Crackling Drake can start to come in. Like you need to try to set up Crackling Drake with maybe even like Mystical Dispute backup. So like it's not even clear to me if there's an untap land on top that I still don't want the haul. But Bob clearly interested in the haul no matter what. As here is Narset added to the fray. That one's currently staying on 5. Has plenty of Memory Deluge to flashback. So actually, Memory Deluge flashback, one of the big upgrades to playing No Rest in Peace is you actually can leverage the flashback mode because all of your graveyard hate is targeted. So that's a big, I guess, noteworthy point, switching over to Kutzel's Flankers over card that is a little bit more of a hammer like Rest in Peace, as Bob has drawn, and it looks like not a land. Don't worry, though. We have both of props, Side Electric Memory, and just all kinds of blue spells and the Crackling Drake.
I think it's 2 Picklock Pranksters, Drake, Dispute, Cruise, 2 profs. So not a lot to work on here for Bob. I mean, you can cast the Picklock Prankster, maybe find a cantrip. The cantrip doesn't even do anything in the face of the Narset. I guess unless it's Sleight of Hand. Sleight of Hand still works against Narset. So maybe that's where you go. Is you go Picklock Prankster, try to find a Sleight. Looks like we're going to go for Shredder.
Okay, Shredder's a fine place to start. Unfortunately, like you mentioned, triggering the Shredder, less good in the face of a Narset.
Yeah. Now, funny enough, if Garrick does double spell on his own turn, that means that Bob would still be able to draw the card off Ledger Shredder because he wouldn't have drawn a card on Garrick's turn. So Garrick is going to fight over this. Probably recognizing that, honestly.
Yeah, the Mystical Dispute makes a lot of sense. And here comes, we get the Gaia Reach.
Oh, I forgot the Gaia Reach
going. All right. Yeah, this is going to start to get really brutal. Sunken Citadel plus Sanitarium means we can do that every turn. Narset staying on 5 for good reason, trying to keep that one around. Gonna start to work away at Bob's hand as Garrick gets to loot away some of these extra lands that he has access to. Now, even willing to down tick Narset. I see Cutzel's flankers, Shark, Typhoon, and Wandering Emperor among the next. Gonna grab Typhoon. Yeah, there's no
I
red
think we're
spells in
done here.
hand. Yeah, to check a big shark, and even Bob's just giving a little bit of a laugh. Just really took too long to get the mana started, and outside of like an unchecked crackling Drake, maybe from some aggressive play from Garrick, I think that the doors really started to close for Bob Culp here.
Yeah, this is kind of what happens with the Phoenix deck, right? You mentioned it. You keep a hand with a couple of cantrips, and Bob just said, "I've had enough. I'm done."
I have so much respect for Bob. Look,
I do
there's
too.
a certain amount of like life equity. You can do anything else with your time than sit there and have the control deck bounce the ball off your face. And not enough players, especially players that are new to the game, play out too long these kinds of control matchups. And in that spot, Bob recognizes that he's dead, I believe correctly so, and is willing to pick it up, move along with things. So Garrick Alford going to advance to 2-0. Remember, number 9 on our leaderboard, someone that is looking for a really good finish, has the potential to lock up an NRG championship invite this weekend, even if he does not win the event. Needs to simply make a deep run. Now, he does need quite a strong finish. I believe nothing short of a top 8 will be good enough, but we'll check the numbers on that just to be sure, so I'm not just spouting stuff. And we have a chance, I believe, to talk to Garrick himself in just a moment about not only his position on the leaderboard at the end of season 1 here, his choice to play control, and all the things around that. Now, while he's getting set up, we'll take a quick look at the leaderboard. There you go. You can have a look. There's Garrick Alford, player you just saw win over Phoenix. He's 2-0 at 46 points. Now, the second player in right now has 65 points. That is Harrison Canfer, who's here today. Tim Hatch is in the lead at 68 points. So that is the person that you know is going to remain stagnant, and is just really hoping that nobody that is unqualified meets or passes him on points. Now, it is very possible for multiple of these players to do it. Garrick Alford specifically looks like he needs, a little over 20 points. So yeah, that is, I believe, needs to make top 4, because that is where we start to get 20 points or more. So does need a very deep run here today in order to lock up that season 1 invite. Remember, there's 2 invites to the top 2 unqualified players on the leaderboard, which is currently Tim Hatch and Harrison Canfer. Now, Harrison Canfer, Connor Mullally, Joey DiGiacomo, and Garrick Alford really all here today, all looking to usurp Tim Hatch. Harrison Canfer, of course, looking to stay his spot. So with all of that point mouthful out of the way, I believe we have Garrick Alford here in the booth, ready to have some questions. Garrick, congratulations.
Thank you.
So talk to me a little bit about kind of what's going on this weekend. So you are number 9 on the leaderboard. You have the potential to pass some players, lock up that NRG championship invite, and you chose to bring Azorius Control for the last event of the season. Talk to me about what's going through your head and your deck selection process and what that all looked like.
I was originally gonna play actually Prowess. My friend Adam actually on Team Flex slot. He won the RC. I was gonna play that, but I was like, I've already had a top 8. I want to have some fun. I actually had to search for his Kanta originally registered in my deck, and I was like, yeah, maybe that's too bad, but I just want to have some fun.
Yeah, we were actually commenting on George DeBoer's decision to register the Monastery Swiss Spears. So, and I know he's on the team as well. As far as the matchup is concerned, I mean, obviously, if you're playing Blue Eye Control, you probably assume you have a good Phoenix matchup, which I'm guessing you do. But like as far as the sideboard plan, choosing to play flankers over Rest in Peace, how has that decision kind of all worked out?
That has actually made the matchup a lot better. So they have negates, disdainful strokes, spell pierces. I have yet to name anything that counters flanker, right? I haven't named a single counter spell that counters flanker. So they have Mystical Dispute, what they can do and pay 3 mana for, but then our normalized become on, our sensors come on. So the flanker has been a huge upgrade over the Rest in Peace or others versions like Ashiok. I've seen people play some Ashioks too, but it has been a huge upgrade. It's also really good against some burn players I know in the room, right? Gain 2 life, scry 2,
like George.
Yeah.
Yeah, your own teammate.
One the teammates, why not? Go ahead and get that little extra 1 up there.
So we talked a little bit about the sideboard plan. This is probably, maybe getting a little in the weeds. And if you don't want to reveal your secrets, feel free. But your sideboard's loaded up with creatures. It's very common for the Is It Phoenix deck to throttle back on the number of creature removal spells they have in the sideboard games. Do you do heavy creature sideboarding, reaching for things even like Regal Caracal in the matchup, or do you just rely on the flankers plus the Shark Typhoons to really do any amount of like that kind of juke and not really reach for all of the creatures that you may have access to?
The caracals are really for like vampires and the burn decks in the room. The creatures that I really just want in the Phoenix matchup is just the flankers, because you really have to cut the Teferis. They're not really good with all the counter spells they have, but the matchup's pretty weird. You kind of use Narset as an enchantment, but really the flankers, what you want to do. Like all your 3-mana spells in that matchup are really, really strong for. So it's just the flankers.
That makes a lot of sense to me. All right. Well, you're 2-0. You need a strong finish this weekend in order to lock up your invite. And it sounds like you have worked with your team Flex Slot, who is very much here in force. And, any shout outs you want to make to them before we let you go and continue, hopefully, what will be an impressive run and a potential for an Energy Championship invite today.
Appreciate that. I do want to shout out George, of course, the owner of Team Flex Slot. Huge. Also got me into streaming. Very, very nice, man. Always love to just talk to him about card selections and stuff. Shout out to also Adam for actually booking the Airbnb and stuff. A bunch of the Flex Slot guys. Just been great, just have a great laugh, some fun, No complaints.
I love that so much. Awesome. Yeah, very, very jealous. Sounds like a great time. Sounds like you got some awesome teammates. And like I said, you are off to a great start here. And we look forward to catching up with you later in the day. Hopefully you can continue that winning streak.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right. Now, with that, I believe that wrapped up what was a shockingly quick Azorius control matchup. Now, of course, right? Some unfortunate things happened to Bob Culp there. The draw is certainly not on his side. I don't really want to make too many claims one way or the other, but things did not pan out for Bob Culp. That was a quick match, which I believe means we have time for our backup match. Something I'm shocked to find myself saying after watching Azorius Control win a match. And, of course, that is going to be against a very different textured matchup. We're talking about Mono Green Devotion, a deck previously I believe to be banned out of the format, versus Abzan Greasefang. So that's, of course, going to be Cliff Boyardee versus Luis Mesa. Cliff Boyardee, of course, our Mono Green Devotion player. This is a little bit of like a flashback, I guess, to old Pioneer, but featuring some new cards. Talk to me a little bit about what's going on here.
The rumors of Nykthos' demise were greatly over-exaggerated. That's all I'll say. But yeah, as far as this deck is concerned, so it's a lot of the stuff that you're probably used to. Kiora, Behemoth Beckoner, the Mana Acceleration, Old Growth Troll, Storm the Festival. But then once we get past that, we have to replace those Karns, which we are mostly replacing them with Outcaster Trailblazer. This is kind of the brand new card here. This is a 4/2 that you can plot. It makes a mana when it comes into play, and it has that same Kiora text where whenever you play a big creature, you get the draw card. You're also playing Leyline of the Guild Pact, which is a card that we've mostly seen in Modern to pair with Sign of Draco and Domain cards. But honestly, here, Drake, we're not using it with Domain. We're just using it as 4 green pips for Nykthos. So one of the really, really busted draws this deck has is just turn 0, Leyline, play my Sunken Citadel on turn 1, turn 2, Nykthos, and that's just 4 mana immediately without any elves.
Yeah, you didn't even cast a spell. You just played lands and had your Leyline enter. So, yeah, it reminds me of I believe, Leyline of Abundance, the banned Leyline in Pioneer. That was part of the equation with that card, was not only did it juice up your elves, but also provided you 2 free devotion for no extra work. This one gives you 4 devotion, no extra work. And we see, a great start here from Cliff with the elves, Kiora, Behemoth Beckoner. And then here is, like you just mentioned, the Outcaster Trailblazer, which as a 4/2 will draw a card off of Kiora. So that's part of the equation as well. And makes a green mana, which is going to deploy another elf. So a ton of devotion already started. Nykthos already found for Cliff Boyardee. There's a look at Outcaster Trailblazer. Makes a mana when it enters. And then, of course, another creature, power 4 or greater, enters battlefield. You draw a card. But Kiora will draw a card off this one. Now, Luis has a Thoughtseize into Vessel of Nascency, I believe, start. Has the Greasefang in hand, along with Shieldred and Esika's Chariot. No 4th land to start playing these 4-mana cards. And so it looks like we're just going right back to Cliff Boyardee, who is quite a board state already. Kiora and Nykthos started. Things can start to get crazy from here. I see Cavalier in second Kiora.
Yeah, this is kind of a weird spot here for Luis because, you could say, cast the Greasefang and then just like try to get some beatdowns on. But I mean, ideally, you just want to, for Luis, you want to go pop the Vessel of Nascency, try to hit Parhelion off of that. Next turn, play the Greasefang, get the Parhelion into play. But I mean, it's a question of, will Luis even get another turn? Which it's not clear at this point whether or not Cliff can kill, because the Kiora can untap the Nykthos, that can get some more cards that way. Looks like it is. And
yeah, that's where we're going.
As far as the kill condition, so usually, at least before the Karn ban, they would just go Karn for Cauldron to loop and do all this stuff. The kill conditions, honestly, at this point, Drake, it's a little bit smoother. You eventually storm into this card called Ulvenwald Oddity, which is a card from exact set. It is Crimson Vow, I believe. So it's 4 mana for a 4/4 trample haste. You can pay 7 to transform it. And on the backside, it's an 8/8 trample haste that says other creatures you control get +1/+1 and have trample and haste. So what ends up happening is you put a bunch of stuff in the battlefield, eventually storm into Oddity, flip that, all of your stuff gets haste, and just attack your opponent all in one go.
I love this. This is so previously it was this weird combo with Karns and all this complicated nonsense you had to try to explain. I love it so much more. Just beat down. Here's my massive thing. All my stuff has haste. I mean, it's a Crater Hoof impression at its finest. And honestly, I like this look from the green deck a lot more. It sounds like you're cheating to some new players across the table. You're just like moving stuff around. You're reaching for your sideboard and putting those cards into play. It looks like you're cheating to new players. Whereas this, I mean, there's no subtlety about it. There's no, ambiguity. It's, here's all my creatures. They all have haste and hit you for a jillion. Die. And that's what Cliff is currently building towards as Invasion of Ixalan, a card going to be deployed here. And that's going to be Luis defending that. As here comes another Outcaster Trailblazer. Draws 3 cards when that one enters, I believe. Goodness. No, 2 cards still.
The next one's going to draw 3, though.
Invasion of Ixalan, a battle not legendary. I don't know how that works, but we're apparently doing 2 battles at the Invasion of Ixalan, going digging there. That one finds the Ulvenwald Oddity, the cards you just mentioned from Crimson Vow. 2 copies in Cliff's deck.
I don't know how much mana is floating. Cliff's writing it down on paper, but if we have enough mana floating, we could just go, presumably you just go cast this, flip it, and then might be enough. We're going to draw some cards. What's also crazy to me about this is the Trailblazers, that they just stack, right? Normally with Kiora, the issue was like you would sort of maybe get to a spot where you would run out of cards because you can't ever have more than 1 Kiora in play. But what's sick about Trailblazer is that they just stack so much better than Kiora ever did. And you just get to a spot where you just get to have, 2 or 3 of them in play, as we see here. And Cliff's just going to pick up 6 cards because these 2 creatures are entering the battlefield. My goodness.
Yeah, we attacked both Invasion of Ixalan with the not summoning sick Outcaster Trailblazer and the not summoning sick because it has haste Ulvenwald Oddity, which of course transformed into 2 belligerent Regisaurs, which are 4/3 tramples that whenever you cast a spell, it gets indestructible till the turn. Those are both 4-power creatures, which means 6 cards coming off the top. Lots of discards, and Luis now very dead, with Cliff still at 20. Not even the Greasefang with the Parhelion 2 can actually kill his opponent, and he's dead on the back crack, so he's going to have to find, I don't know if there's any sweepers, if there's anything we can do about this. Not even cracking the Vessel of Nascency, just going straight to draw step. We appear to have found a Rafine's Informant. I don't think that's going to be enough.
Yeah, I'm not sure why we didn't pop the Vessel there. I mean, I don't know if it matters, because even if you hit Yahtzee and hit the Parhelion and Cliff just takes, Cliff has a reach blocker anyways, but even if Cliff just took the damage, you just take 13 on tap and very easily kill Luis. So I don't think it matters either way. As we see this, Waddle is going to get flipped, and Cliff's like, I'm just going to attack you with all my creatures.
Beep, beep. He just flips, just straight to business as Cliff Boyardee. Just straight to flipping the Oddity and approximately a jillion damage. So that was a very quick game. So we're going to have a quick look at some deck lists from these players. I believe we should be starting with the Abzan Greasefang deck from Luis Mesa. Take a quick look at that. So this is an old matchup, and there should be some probably established sideboarding for this matchup. We got 3 Fatal Push, 2 Damping Sphere, 2 Mosswood Dread Knight, 2 Temporary Lockdown, 2 Unlicensed Hearse, 1 Bitter Triumph, 1 Duress, 1 Knight of Bottom, 1 Silence. How is sideboarding against the new look of Mono Green?
Damping Sphere good against Nykthos, Lockdown good against the Elves, same thing with Fatal Push. Past that, probably not a ton else.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Get the creature removal in and maybe some things to shut down Nykthos. Outside of that, don't dilute your deck too much. Try and execute your main game plan. Mono Green Devotion. With that, quick and simple, let's have a look at Cliff Boyardee's look at Mono Green Devotions. This one maybe a little less established. No Karn board this time. We got 3 Pick Your Poison, 3 Tail Swipe, 2 copies of the Stone Brain, 2 Unlicensed Hearse, 1 Emrakul the Promised End, 1 Offset Bailoff, 1 Cityscape Leveler, 1 Arasta of the Endless Web, and 1 Tranquil Frillback. What kind of things we like against Greasefang?
It's weird. I'm looking at a mono green deck, and I'm not used to seeing an actual sideboard. So this is news to me. But as far as what cards we want from Cliff, the Hearses are pretty good at fighting over the graveyard stuff with Greasefang. Pick Your Poison, Tail Swipe. Tail Swipe is weird because is it an instant or a sorcery? I can't remember.
It is
Tail
an
Swipe
instant.
is an instant. Okay, so that one we definitely want. I know there's some of those versions that are sorceries. So Tail Swipes to fight Greasefang at instant speed. The Hearses are very good. Past that, the Tranquil Frillback is good, but it's a little bit slower graveyard hate, so I'm not sure if you want to go towards that 4-drop.
Yeah, so I mean, some good options even if you don't want to reach for all those things. And the Hearse is, I think, more or less the obvious choices of the bunch. But outside of that, again, this is a deck really proactive, not really looking to dilute its game plan too much, especially when its game plan seemed to work just fine in game 1. So players very light sideboarding, if at all. However, the play draw, I believe, will also flip as well as we go back down to the match here for game number 2, where Luis presumably going to be on the play this time. Has access to Duress in the opening hand, a lot of 2-mana spells, maybe just 1 land. Yeah, I don't think we can work with that. As he goes to a mulligan, Cliff looks to be on a keep. I think I saw a Leyline in the bunch too, so we might even get to start with a Leyline again. So easy.
Yeah, he didn't have. I don't think Cliff didn't have the.
Oh, he didn't have it last time. You're right.
Yeah.
Oh, the smiley face. Wow, Cliff making a little art for us.
Well, we
decided.
Oh, the one is the nose. I like that. But we decided to go instead of this. So I forgot who it was yesterday that did this. Oh, it was Drew Buchanan who did the smiley face, but the cards were sideways. So Cliff's deciding to change the smiley face metagame a little bit and go the other way around. So I don't know who's better. We'll have to decide. But here we go.
I think that's a thing for Twitch chat. I think they need to kind of figure that out among themselves. As Leyline of the Guild Pact going to be put in for the first time on turn 0. This is an interaction you talked about. Able to power up the Nykthos. Is he Sunken Citadel too? We might have the full draw. We might have Sunken Citadel and the Nykthos, like you called out, just to tap Godless Rain on 1 for Luis. And Forest, Llanowar Elves for Cliff as we go back to Luis.
And there's a Bitter Triumph, so we can go Bitter. This is actually kind of nice for Luis. Bitter Triumph, the Elf, discard Esika's, or do we have Parhelion? No, I think we just have Chariot. So Bitter Triumph, discard Chariot, Elf dead, untap, land 3 Greasefang. That's a pretty good start if you're Luis.
Yeah,
and
looks
we are
like
going to
holding on to the Triumph here a little bit. As here comes
Triumph.
Outcaster Trailblazer. So we did make like 5 green men, I believe, using the Elf. We did have the Nykthos. That made 5 green. We used 3 of it for the Trailblazer, which is going to make 1 more. And now we are doing the play you talked about. Bitter Triumph, discarding Esika's Chariot on the Trailblazer instead.
Yeah, so it looks like maybe Luis prioritizing. God, that Hearse.
That's a giant beating. Yeah, that Hearse is very timely for Cliff, who already has more mana dialed up in the form of. Oh yeah, here we go. As soon as that Greasefang is being cast, Cliff going after the graveyard with the Hearse. Going to put 2 cards up under that.
God, that was brutal. I was like, Luis's draw looked pretty good. He had the turn 2 removal spell to kill the creature, and then the ability to play the Greasefang. But Cliff's hand was just a little bit better. Now, to Luis's credit, it does not look like Cliff has a payoff. Right, all the mana in the world, the graveyard offline, but as of right now, no payoff. And Luis actually had the option to go land for Chariot, choosing to go for the Damping Sphere instead. So that's an interesting decision. Maybe just, wants to make sure that if Cliff does draw a payoff, doesn't have access to a ton of mana to keep going. So I kind of understand that. That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I mean, assuming that Cliff has the mana all dialed up, if he ever draws anything at all, you're in trouble. Shut that down first. And then something like that normally would look pretty anemic, like just an Esika's Chariot, right? Like not actually that strong compared to what your deck normally does. That might actually be good enough to get over the finish line over time, assuming that Cliff's mana is now sufficiently disrupted by the Damping Sphere. So Invasion of Ixalan's going to find Lair of the Hydra.
It's technically a payoff.
In a way. I mean, the Nykthos now doesn't do its thing anymore, but we do still have 3 Llanowar Elvish Mystic shape things. So, yeah, this is just the anemic beatdowns from both decks. Just plan A's here all around. We're actually attacking the Invasion of Ixalan down to 1 defense counter, siege counter. What are they? I don't know what it is.
Loyalty? I don't even know what it is.
It's not loyalty because they're not planeswalkers. It's a different kind, but I don't know what kind. As here comes 4 mana. I believe this is going to be a chariot.
Yep.
Here comes the kittens.
Chariot, and that's going to mean Luis can now kind of have a wider battlefield, especially if Luis is maybe worried about that Invasion of Ixalan flipping. You now have 3 blockers to clear the 3 elves. I guess there's the layer of the Hydra as well. So it's a question of, does Luis actually want to attack with the Greasefang here? You probably do, but then I guess how much do you care about the belligerent? What's it? Belligerent? You know the name.
Regisaur, belligerent Regisaur.
Regisaur, okay.
4/3, I believe, trample that can get indestructible when you cast the spell. So, I mean, that's meaningful if we're trying to beat down with Eska's Chariot. It does trade with the Chariot itself. So we are going to actually bash in for 4 more damage with the Greasefang. No food for Hearse.
And maybe if you're Luis, you actually don't mind too much if Cliff decides to flip that invasion, because it requires Cliff to basically sacrifice 2 elves, where you have to send all 3 elves into the red zone. You get to block 2 of them. So you're essentially trading 2 elves to flip that Regisaur in. And maybe Luis is just fine with that trade.
Yeah, because even if you just only animate the Hydra, right, and just be like, okay, big Hydra, hard to block, you can just chump block with one of the tokens, and then you're good to go. And you can do that ad nauseum by just making a token every turn with the Chariot. So that's not really going to work. And we do still have the 3 elves. Here's a Cavalier. So this one is going to go digging for lands, but Nykthoses aren't good. We already have a lot of the lands we'd be interested in anyway in play. So the land ramp isn't great, but the 5/6 blocker is. So that, ironically, Cavalier of Thorns kind of just good for its stats right now.
Yeah, 5/6 blocker, and then the potential to try and mill over Storm the Festival. I think that's what Clip was really looking for. Didn't find the Storm. It looks like the graveyard is a couple lands, Kiora, and an Elf. So no Storm there for Cliff. And Luis is now in a position where, thought we were going to be able to attack with the Chariot, and we're just doing it anyways.
Chariot's we're just jamming everything in the token here. Okay. Greasefang and Chariot coming in.
So now the Cav probably blocks the Chariot, take a little bit of damage that way, because I believe the Greasefang crewed the Chariot. So if you block the Chariot, you take 4 from the cats.
No, I think the cats crewed the Chariot. Maybe you're right.
I thought
he pointed to the cats in the Chariot. I don't know. Whatever. We'll see when the blocks start getting lined up, because he's definitely going to get to blocking. Okay, so we're crewing the Hearse. So yeah, we can actually trade for the Greasefang. So assuming it's just Chariot Greasefang, Cavalier can get in front of Chariot, and Hearse can get in front of Greasefang, and that trades off everything. But then if there's a backup Greasefang, maybe things start to look problematic. So yeah, we're just going to eat a cat instead. So you were correct. The Greasefang, I guess, crewed. And now there goes Chariot. There goes Cat. 2 damage punched through.
Yep. So that's going to put Cliff down to 10, and Luis getting some chip shot. Getting some chip shot damage in here, but Cliff is every single turn that passes, Cliff's board state is just getting so much wider, and it's going to be very, very tough for Luis to kind of. Past this point, it's going to be tough for Luis to have profitable attacks that even can get any sort of damage in. And now you have only 1 cat back to block, so Cliff can even send 2 elves at the battle to flip that. Maybe leave the Cav back, maybe attack with the Cav. Actually, I kind of like getting in the Cav too, because you're
everything.
Extra blocker from the invasion.
Right. Yeah, a 4/3 blocker worth quite a bit on this battlefield, as the elves are, as you can see, going after the invasion. Cavalier going at Luis. We're starting a real racing situation with all the backups here. But, I mean, really, like you said, Cliff still, even without Nykthos, shut down, of course, by the Damping Sphere to its mana production, still developing his board, getting these 4/3s. The Cavalier was a massive draw. And the Hearse is actually growing pretty big as well, too, as 4 counters on it. Or 4 cards under it, rather.
Looks like I believe the cat token may have chump blocked the Cav, so Luis preserving the life total a little bit. We got 4 mana for a troll, because notably, Yearling is considered casting a spell off of the battle, so that Damping Sphere will tax the troll. So, but yeah, plenty of mana to pay for that. Not a huge deal. But as you can see, I mean, now look at Cliff's battlefield. It's a 4/3 indestructible, 4/4 trample, 5/6 plus the layer of the Hydra and the Hearse. And Luis just has a 4/3 and a 2/2. So not exactly sure how Luis can get out of this, especially in the face of that Hearse. If it weren't for the Hearse, one of Luis's ways out could be find a Parhelion, put it into the graveyard. But with that Hearse in play, and if I take a quick look at Luis's deck list, maybe something like a Shieldred the Apocalypse could chip shot Cliff away. I'm not seeing it here.
Yeah, it's tough. And I mean, his leftovers in hand aren't good. It's like land, Takanuma, and I believe a Thoughtseize are the leftovers for Luis. So none of those cards really doing much to add to the mix. Takanuma especially even shut off by the hearse. Now, you maybe could do some trickery. If, like, there's a lot of trades to get the Greasefang in the yard. You can get it back at instant speed, but then still, your board is still dwindling. That's still using mana that requires you to get it, replay it. That's a 7 mana transaction in a spot where now Cliff's starting to look to assemble almost a lethal crack back. Yeah, crew, hearse, make it a 6/6.
And that's going to eat the Greasefang. And Luisa's just going to lose that
now-
Greasefang. We might even be facing lethal in play with one blocker. Block the hearse, take 5, 9, 13, 16 plus the layer. Yeah, this is way more than lethal.
Yeah, this is over lethal, even with a blocker back, I believe. And a lot of this stuff has trample. And yeah, so Cliff is actually going to explain it to Luis. And yeah, I mean, not a lot he can do, right? Really kind of hope that Cliff messes up with some of the blocks and stuff like that. You can maybe get your Takanuma involved. So really, I mean, a good performance from the Mono Green Devotion deck. Kind of timely cards, I'd say, in the forms of hearse and things of that nature, was really able to kind of win that kind of mopey beatdown stuff. So with that actually concludes our round number 2. We're going to take a quick look at the leaderboard and how things are situated right now. Again, remember, this is the end of season 1. So there is going to be 2 players on this leaderboard that are not currently highlighted in orange, which of course, as you can see, means that they're qualified for the Energy Championship. That are going to be qualified, not without having to win. Remember, this is not a showdown event. That are going to be qualified for the Energy Championship at the end of this weekend because it is the end of season 1. So that's something that we saw Garrick Alfred fighting for. Harrison Camphor's here as well. We saw Peo earlier. A lot of these players here fighting for all of that. And it is actually a tight race. You know, Tim Hatch there at the top is able to be caught by the other players that are playing in this event as well. So there is quite a bit at stake for those players outside of course, the normal prizes for our Pioneer 5K trial as well. And we're going to be seeing more of them for sure as time goes on. But with that, we'll also take a quick look at, I believe, the players already qualified for the Energy Championship at the end of the year. I guess we're actually going to go to a break. So we are going to go ahead and cut to the break. That'll be the end of round number 2. We'll be back with round number 3 very soon. Don't go anywhere.